the initial idea in doing this was having a way to talk about spiritual life with people who weren't interested in religion or who were offended by religion or just wouldn't show up at a class being taught about philosophy by a swami. So I thought that art is one of the few things that I find or that I would define as being really pure. It's the purest form of karma yoga that we have, in the sense that it's created for its own sake. It's not functional necessarily. It doesn't even have to be beautiful. It's presenting of an idea. And when I first started studying artists in order to put this series together, I was amazed by the investigations that they were getting into, the questions that they were asking, and how through their art they were trying to investigate these odd philosophical concepts that occur to us, but we don't really have any physical or material way of testing them, of finding out what the meaning is. And so I got really excited about that and started looking for artists that were, that were using their art as a means of investigation, of learning something or of touching something. And so when I started pulling all of these artists together after I had given about three or four of the classes, one of the students that had been coming raised not an objection, but a question. He said, I really enjoyed this class, but I can't help but wonder if the artists were actually thinking any of the things that you're saying about their art when they were creating it. And I wanted just to start the class by explaining kind of what I'm doing, so that doesn't settle as the concept. I'm not trying to speak for the artist, and I'm not necessarily trying to say what the artist is trying to say. And that's why I'm sticking to contemporary art, because that's very much part and parcel of the way contemporary art is viewed. The experience of the observer is as important as the intentions of the artist in contemporary art. So there's a certain amount of license there. And I think I mentioned this once before, that the general idea is, the way that I explained it at that time was, if you have a little boy that builds a couch fort and has all of the cushions standing on head and with a roof and everything, and his father comes home from work, who's a physicist, and sees this structure on the couch, the father, because he was a physicist, could give you an hour-long lecture on all the forces at play in building that fort, in what holds that roof up, and what contains that structure, and what makes it all work. And it would be a valid discussion of that couch fort, even though none of those things was intended by the young boy building the couch fort. And so I really believe that Vedanta has the same relationship with art and beauty, that there's a reason things are beautiful. There's a reason that things are intriguing. There's a reason that we are able to relate to a piece of artwork and to gather meaning from it. And that's really what I'm trying to do in this class. It's not a matter of explaining the intentions of the artist or even knowing the intentions of the artist, but it's a matter of looking at their work and feeling it and hearing those parts of truth that are manifested in it for each one of us. And I encourage you, if you see something in a piece of work that we look at, I tend to motor on, just because I guess that's the way I am put together, but I encourage you to speak up and to express an opinion or an idea, because I've learned in the past that that's when really some of this art really comes to life, is when it becomes a conversation, a piece that we can point at and talk about. So I titled this week's collection Identity, Place, and Time, and that was not my intention when I started, but it was the way that it very clearly shaped up as I looked at these three artists. Two of them I went and found at the Museum of Contemporary Art in downtown Boulder. And the first two artists are from there. And then, of course, Jose who I've met through doing the classes, and him sharing some of his art with me. And then I had a wonderful opportunity to kind of speak with him about it on Saturday, kind of an interview, and that was even more exciting to me because of the ideas that he brought up around the work. Really validated some of the insights that I was feeling from it, and I was excited. I was just very excited to step into that. So we'll do his works last. So this first one is an artist by the name of Christopher Wright, and the exhibition is called Just As I Am. And it was a room full of huge paintings, pictures slash paintings. He uses found photographs that he then blows up to this large size. Like when I say large size, I'm talking like 6 feet plus in each dimension. And in doing that, he then once he gets them blown up, does some what do they call that? Screen print, silk screen. He silk screens over them and then draws on them and kind of tunes them to be what he's interested in doing. And this is one of a sentence from his description that caught my attention. He says it features large-scale works that capture moments within places of sanctuary, communal backyard barbecues, sitting around the kitchen table, or time together in the living room after a satisfying meal. These moments of gathering are symbolic of liturgical spaces in that they prompt feelings of gratitude, togetherness, and inclusivity. And that was a magical 2 words there, liturgical spaces, spaces for public worship. And of course, as a Vedantist, that immediately grabbed my idea of daily life being practiced, daily life, karma yoga. Every action is an action of worship. Every action is a prayer. Every thought is a prayer. And so for him to be presenting his art and seeing that in these found photographs, I was intrigued. And so I looked at them from that perspective and just saw so much. In this painting here, it's called Fire in My Bones. And it seems quite obviously to be a birthday party between a mother and daughter with a birthday cake at a table. And the artist himself talks about this snapshot that in itself is not moving. It's the moment captured. And the moment, as we've talked about, is God. The moment is God. It is the absolute unchanging. In the moment, there is never change. We assume change or view change because we make a copy of the present moment in the mind and then compare our mind image with the material image, and the mind fills in the gaps, which is movement, which is change. And so he's got this unchanging snapshot of a moving through time. So you have the birthday symbolizing the young woman's, growing up, changing, caught against a background of a still life, a background that doesn't change. She's got the pineapple and the little bowl of whatever it is hanging on the wall there. And you notice in the backgrounds of all of his work, there's a still life, there's something that doesn't change, and usually somewhere there is a bouquet of flowers. And this bouquet of fresh flowers on the table is a symbol of it's the link between the unchanging background or still life on the wall and the changing celebration or life that's happening in front of it. That as the flowers wilt and die on the table, that's the passing of time, that's the changing of time. So it's the element that ties the changing experience that's in the foreground with the unchanging absolute that's in the background. And this was fascinating to me because in Suzuki's book of that Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, or Beginner's, whatever it is, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, yeah. He talks about the thing that makes art beautiful in Japanese art anyway, he's talking about Japanese art, is the imperfection of the foreground, which is what causes the constant sense of change, against a perfect background. And when the imperfect in the front points at the perfection in the back, the unchanging absolute, that gives birth to beauty. That gives birth to inspiration. And so he says in Japanese art, that's always the goal, is to have the imperfection of the art, of the piece, point to the perfection of its ideal, of the background, unchanging absolute that is behind it. And actually, we're going to get to talk about this some in Jose's work also, because one of the things that's highly valued in Japanese art is if there's an accident or an occurrence that happens in the art that was purely chance, that actually makes it beautiful, makes it really adds an element to it. So this is his first one. His second picture here, Dark Was the Night. It's just a gathering. Again, these are found pictures, so he doesn't have a personal context for them. But I like what he's drawing over it. You saw in the last ones also very similar drawings. He calls it the social engine. These are the things that are happening in the room that are not visible. So the relationships with each other, the relationships with the environment itself, the definition of the space, the definition of what's happening on. And so he goes and he tries to just bring out these different elements. You know, you've got the young boy sitting there on that blue stool, literally with a white line attaching him to his mother behind him. So you've got this going on, and him staring straight ahead at something off the screen. You see that there's a lot of thinking going on there, a lot of pondering happening there. And it's the man standing up that's kind of driving the atmosphere of the room, or the idling engine of attention standing over there as he watches. You've got the light in the back part of the background, part of the unchanging background, which I liked, to have the light be part of this unchanging absolute. You know, in the eyes of Eckhart Tolle, that light and love are synonymous. So you've got this light in the background, and once again, you've got the bouquet of flowers sitting in the middle of everything, showing the unification between the background and the foreground. And then all of the individuals looking at each other and everything playing its role. He says, you know, one of the things that he says about himself is that maintenance is needed to grow and to better ourselves. And so he tries to picture that in these interactions, this public liturgy that he's trying to encapsulate, this moment of worship, that this whole experience of the changing is maintenance. It's maintenance for improvement, for constantly renewing ourselves, for constantly getting up, trying again, for constantly pushing against the lower natures and whatnot. And you see on the table all the symbols of the moment there. You've got the letter sitting on the edge with no writing on it. So you've got a letter with no writing. You have what seems to be a small box of candy. All of these pieces of the social engine that are laying around and describing the environment, and how the meaning is contextual. You know, you don't know if there's where they are at this moment. You don't know what it means. And so you have to build that. And you actually are all of the white drawing pieces. You are the one who is creating the context and the story and the meaning of what you're looking at, not just in this art, but in the room you're in now, in every context that you're in. It is you that is creating the scene. It's you that's choosing what it means. You know, it's one of my favorite things to do when I watch people, is to look into their head, to look at everything that I can see about the way they're dressed, the way they're walking or standing, the way they're talking, or the way they're looking, their overall condition. Are they neat? Are they sloppy? Are they, you know, do they have nice shoes on? All of these things, and to put together a narrative. And I saw a movie, which I always kick myself around the block because I didn't mean to watch the movie. I caught it just online one time and watched the whole thing through. And it was this marvelous movie that took place in a restaurant. And it was this old woman who was having dinner by herself, and she was just looking around the room and watching everything that was going on. And what you heard as the narration for the movie, was her thoughts about what was happening. So there was a birthday party going on at a table, and the birthday boy was sitting in his chair. And when his mother and his grandmother came in, he didn't stand up to speak with her, and she had thought that he was rude, and blah blah blah, and she read all these things into it. She saw a man sitting at a dining table, and he was an old man, and he was just sitting there alone and not saying anything, but he was smiling and was seemingly talking but whispering. And she just saw him as a crazy man. And so they're like all these little vignettes. Then she leaves the restaurant after seeing all these stories, and then the camera, which is you, actually gets to go in and see what's really going on. So you move into that birthday party where the boy was sitting at the table, and it turns out he's in a wheelchair, so he couldn't stand up when the people came in to greet him and to say hello to him. And the old man sitting at the table smiling by himself, kind of muttering to himself, was celebrating his anniversary with his deceased wife, and he had brought her picture, and it was sitting out of view across the table from him. And so he was conversing with her and talking to her. And it was a very celebratory time for him. He wasn't sad or lonely at all. He was remembering and joyfully remembering. And so you see that's what's being implicated here in this picture. When the story of your life, we talk about this all the time, this story of ego, is your social engine. It's you taking all these disparate pieces of information, which, as we know, are really part of a unity, but you're taking this dismantled unity and literally trying to put it back together in ignorance, because you don't have all the pieces, you don't have all of the understanding that's necessary to do that. But the process of living is trying to reconstruct this implied unity of everything from the disparate pieces that we take in through the five senses. So it's this constant exercise of trying to touch something that we know but can't experience or can't see, which is that one without a second that lies behind everything. This picture here I thought was very interesting, just because of the mood. What do you feel just looking at it? The title of it is "I'd Like to Be with My Friends," which is actually, incidentally, the white on the right of the screen and on the far left is actually the wall of the of the museum. It's the red bounded square that's actually the work of art. So the title on the right, "I'd Like to Be with My Friends," is actually also what the text says that you can't quite read to the left of the bathroom door, or what we assume is a bathroom door. But you see that mood. It's like there's an isolation to it of him in that room, looking out, not coming out, but curious and interested in what's going on out there. I like the idea of the red walls being a sign of activity. Red, rajas, red is that activity happening out there. And he's in a room with more pastel colors, more muted, a more quiet space, separate and apart from it. And then just glancing out there. He's not prepared to go out there. He's in a t-shirt, looks like I would assume he may be brushing his teeth or something, who knows. But he's not in a situation where he can just go out there. But the thought is there, I'd like to be out with my friends. And it's kind of a statement of our own condition at times when we find our discontent. We think, I sure would like, this, that, or the other. And we look at it, we glance at it through the door of the mind, perhaps, or even just physically, like he's looking at it through the world like that.
So Swami, and I had a comment. So this to me, it kind of also just struck me that it's a feeling of lack that we feel all the time, right? We kind of want that fullness, or that um, enlargement, expansion, which earlier times or most of the time, one feels like picking up the phone and talking to somebody and says, oh, maybe I'll find it there. Or maybe if I had this person or that relationship, and then pretty soon you realize now after, many years that of course the feeling is just within and it's never going to be fulfilled outside, outside this door, which this man is looking at, or which we look out from our mind. Um, um, so to me, it's almost like I think I'm in this stance all the time. Not all
Yeah.
the most of the
Yeah.
time. It's like whether I'm waiting for the grace or my heart to expand, or it expands and that kind of goes back again to being, looking out that doorway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyhow, I mean
I love that. Yeah. I think absolutely that's true. And the fact is, that you are where you are. I mean, that's a very good point. That sense of lack, where that comes from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where does our sense of lack comes from? It comes from our identifying with the partial,
Mm-hmm.
the body and mind, which doesn't can only see what it sees and hear what it hears. It's not aware of the unity. It's not aware of the fullness that's within. And because of our identity, we've we're not paying attention to the room that we're in, which
But
contains
just like
everything that
this
we
art,
need. Hmm.
yeah. But just like this artist, this man, though, I think I'm aware, or we are aware that is what, after being in Vedanta for these many years, we know that
Right.
there is fullness outside this door, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we glance at it, or I'm talking about myself, and you kind of all, you come close to it, and then but yet not fully, right? You're still inside that door, you're not out there.
Right. Well, but the interesting thing is, I don't think we can come through that door
Mm,
because I think what's outside that door is imagination.
mm,
He's glancing and he's getting a partial view,
mhm, mhm,
of what's going on out there, and he's curious. It's pulling his attention outside. But I think the secret of it is, the pastel room that he's in, that what he needs to do and where he needs to be is in the room that he's in.
mm,
He's not prepared to step out there and really can't really step out there in that condition.
mhm,
And
mhm,
so it's this idea of pulling our attention from outside the door to inside the door and
mm,
to being
mhm,
where we are and doing
mhm,
what we're doing and letting that be enough. Not
mm.
letting the
True.
imagined outside the door pull us into a sense of needing to be outside the door,
Mhm,
needing
mhm.
needing to be somewhere we simply cannot be. We
Yeah.
cannot be outside of ourselves.
Mhm. True, true. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent.
Swami, I guess I'm looking at this in the context of what's gone on over the last couple of years with
Hmm.
people being locked in and afraid because of COVID, and realizing that how much he misses his friends. The red could also be the COVID and the fear that so many people had, that he's looking out and he's acknowledging his extreme loneliness and isolation that really affected the spirit of so many people during COVID.
Yeah,
That's my hit off of it. Or just if he's elderly, the loneliness and isolation of the elderly.
yeah.
That's that's just
Or yeah, exactly. Or even just kind of existentially, the loneliness and separation that we all feel locked in a body.
yes, sure, yes,
Our
very much so.
inability to
Mhm,
communicate effectively
Uh-huh.
with each other, and
Mm-hmm.
that's so
Be in
much of what
relationship,
romance.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
so much what romance and marriage and family is all about.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to seek that oneness, that sense of
Mm-hmm.
connection, that sense of wholeness,
Mm-hmm.
through the body, through the mind.
Mm-hmm. Or
And
just
we
a
all,
lack of sense of community. Um,
yes,
that this gentleman is seeing, feeling, and that
yeah,
he's having trouble getting out of it for whatever reason. And this is affecting a lot of people
yeah,
in our day and
absolutely.
age.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yes,
Very excellent. Yeah, that's very true.
The isolation and the loneliness really, really bogs down the spirit. I mean, I remember talking to Swami Chaitananda when COVID started, and
Hmm.
he was getting calls all over the country. I hope I'm not being too graphic. Devotees were calling him saying people were jumping off the buildings of their apartment because
Oh,
of that incredible fear and what was going on with this COVID. It was really, I was very impacted by that, and so was Swami. Anyway.
wow. Yeah, no, that's, that's, it's, well, it's interesting because it was a very difficult time, more so for some than others. Because I used to joke
Right,
about it, that my life
right,
didn't change at all.
right. Yeah,
And, I was living an isolated life in a bubble of a monastery, and my life just continued on with that. So
right.
it was an interesting thing to hear the stories from the people that I was working with even then, and of
Mm-hmm.
course
Mm-hmm.
hearing them now, of that sensation, of that sense. But you see that it's again, it shows you how nothing is absolute in the relative. It's,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for some people, I heard them talk about how beneficial it was for them, that
Yeah, right.
they
For
got in
me.
touch with themselves, they
Yes.
found hobbies that they had forgotten about and did, and did a lot more reading and a lot more quiet
Mm-hmm.
time. It just got rid of a lot of stress in their
And more
lives.
spiritual practice for a lot of us that are spiritual
Yes.
or have Vedanta. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I got lots of calls with people that, friends and neighbors that were just really quite despondent.
Yeah.
It was anyway. So yeah,
Yeah. So it's again,
interesting.
it kind of shows you that the world isn't something. It's not this or that. It's what you make of it. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for all of us put through that same circumstance, or at least similar circumstances, similar effects, different people made different things of the time.
Mm-hmm.
For some people it was a great boon. For some people it was a horrible discipline that they were forced to go
Mm-hmm.
through. And some people
Mm-hmm.
didn't notice any change at all. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's always important to remember it's you that gives your world value, and
Right.
it's that can change the value of your world. That you're
Exactly.
not subject to an external reality. It's your
Exactly.
internal reality that determines your
Exactly.
external reality. And to take back that power, it's very important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep.
and this artist here, actually, Aaron Hyunhee Kang, or Kang, A Home in Between. Now, back in 2021, here in Boulder, there was the Marshall Fire. I think that was what they called it. And it was the one that made Greg have to move and Marla have to clean up their house and all of that. So this woman's house burned to the ground.
Mm.
Also, she was an immigrant. She was a child. She was born in Korea and brought here as an immigrant with her parents. And so that fire, really, the displacement that she experienced in that fire was very metaphorical for her, and very, very, very opening for her in a way of dealing with it. And so her art deals with that. She says that she was driven by observed spaces of diaspora as metaphors for her life and identity. All the something like 1,500 homes burned to the ground. And she was saying that pushed, suddenly everybody was like her. That she had grown up being a member of her own diaspora, her own, moving about in a strange land, and that this fire suddenly made the community that used to play the role of the other, brought her together, with them, because now they were all suffering this loss of identity, this loss of place, this loss of home. And so in her art, it says she incorporates elements of the natural world, figures, and architecture while building a new home as a site of belonging, resistance, and healing. And I liked that exploration about what is home, because I think that's another word for God, like beauty or truth or being, or the now. I think that home could also be a name of God. And what we try to create in our home is what we intuitively know exists inside, but we don't access it because we're not looking at it. We don't see it. And so I was very attracted to the idea of her using her art and all of these material things to explore this notion of home, this notion of belonging, this notion of healing, this notion of growing. And so again, she uses here in this last one, her latest work centers around destruction, repair, and resilience. Well, that's what the Divine Mother is, right? She's creation, maintenance or sustenance, and destruction. The same three categories. And I found that fascinating. Anyway, it caught my attention. And of course, this first picture, when I looked at it, was quite striking. Again, it's contextual. This question that I felt when looking at that picture, I was like, well, what is that? What's happening there? What's the story there? And where my mind went immediately with this picture was 9/11. I remember when 9/11 happened, and that was such a huge, society and culture changing, world changing event for us anyway, for most people and Americans, I think, in particular. And but I was out at the Olima retreat a couple of days after that happened, and I was out there by myself walking around the bog, and there were all these deer out there, and they were doing what they always did. And I was thinking, it was a very healing moment for me, because it showed me that 9/11 was not a world event. It belonged to a small population of the world, to human beings. That to the deer, to the forest, for them, life was just going on as life was going on. And I really appreciated that context that day on that walk, and was thinking about how true that is, how it's really my identity and my insistence on my narrative that creates this trauma, that creates the problems, that creates the injustices, that creates all of these things. And that really, if you broaden the context, it's just life going on. It's not necessary for it to be good. It's not necessary for it to be bad. It's just necessary to accept it as it is, and to just keep going on, to not let the world of change define me and my experience, to really do what Vivekananda says, to stay inside and know I'm ever free, I'm ever pure, I'm ever blissful, and to insist on that in the center of a world of change that may or may not be suggesting something different. So that question, how does identity affect our perspective? Gay rights doesn't seem like a big deal if you're not gay. It's like women's rights. If you're a guy, it's like, oh, that's a nice topic of discussion. You want to certainly be sensitive and whatnot, but it doesn't hit. It doesn't hit. And it's interesting. So now, part of seeing that, kind of knowing that, witnessing that, it really helps when times get really odd or really out of balance, or the world seems negative to me, to step back and say, wait a minute, I get to define this. I get to frame this. I get to determine the value of this. And I can insist on it being positive. I can insist on finding, the what I call the axioms of spiritual life in it, that God is love, that the one motivating force in the universe is love, that that this is unreal in one sense, in the sense that I don't have all the pieces to understand the perfection of it. I have to assume a certain amount of it. And it's really empowering to find that establishment inside, to insist on that establishment of the definitions and principles of the world that you live in, and to make the world be that way, not because you're being deluded, but because all perspective is singular. It's not absolute. It is anything that you think about any of those problems can be seen from many different angles. We're seeing that in politics right now. And part of our struggle is that we're not seeing it as a whole. We're identifying with our small parts and fighting instead of understanding that there's room for everybody in this, and it's going to just depend. It always depends on where you stand, on what it's going to look like and what it's going to be. And so here she captures that in this picture, that that event, you can see the cow just kind of looking at it, and you can just imagine what the cow's thinking. It's like he has no idea what that is. There's absolutely no definition. And he's just looking at all the other animals are just going on. they're, they're not concerned at all about it. It's just, oh, there it is. And that's an interesting dichotomy. It's an interesting way of looking at something that affected 1,500 families that day as their houses all burned to the ground, and the animals stood around and watched from a distance. Here, this is a picture of her home in the wasteland, that's there. And she says here, the challenge keeping all these little windows out of the text for me. As the experience of repair and reconstruction unfolded for Kang, she began to view the home as a space where her conflicting emotions coexist. At the same time, this deeply personal space is perhaps the only place where healing, reconciliation, and forgiveness can take place. And this is what really brought me closer to the idea of home and God, because I could write that paragraph about my own self, and I would write it as an internal experience, that to view myself as a space where conflicting emotions coexist, to allow that coexistence, to understand that coexistence, to see it, these different ideas that occur in the mind, these because really our life is about incongruity, right? It's we say we want one thing and we do another. We say that we're going for this, but we always have our weaknesses that seem to shut it down. And somehow we have to contain all of that. Somehow we have to hold on to that or be in the midst of that. And it's really in this inner shrine of ours, it's really the only place where our healing can take place. It can't take place outside of ourselves. It can't take place because of external causes. The internal healing, which I think is our trip, our journey to realization, is the healing of all of these splits, these dualities that we maintain inside that are unnatural to us. When we're not one person, and the process of realization is that process of becoming a single person, a person who says what he means, who thinks what he does, that doesn't have contradictory things going on within all the time, and without. To not have different personas for different groups of people, to not have, not to be different from one person to the next, but to be earnest, to be sincere in what we are, no matter what's going on around. I can imagine if that was my home, even in that condition, it's still my home. It's still the symbol of my wholeness, of my safety, of my growing, of my unity. This is very interesting. It's very much the same. Especially when you find out her background, she tells this story. My mom waited for me every day around the bus stop, greeting and asking me how my day was. I tried my best to be optimistic and cheerful, but she knew my days were hard. She would quietly hold my hand harder to let me know it was okay and that I was safe with her. this the rest of her story was quite harsh, because the students on the bus started making fun of her mom, because she had this little Korean mother, you know, and the kids started making fun of the fact that her mother came out to the bus to meet her every day. And so one day, when she got off the bus and her mother came to take her hand, she walked quickly past her mother and didn't take her hand. And she said that her mother never came to the bus again after that day, and that she had always felt so sorry for that day. But one day she got home from the bus and her mother had set out an easel and some paints and some brushes next to her own. Her mother was an artist also, next to her own painting supplies. And she says that's how she found her art, and how she was able to kind of overcome that remorse for having separated herself from her mother on that afternoon. And so again, here you have a picture of a woman swimming in a red cocktail dress. The context is contradictory to the outfit. It doesn't make sense. And yet there's not a struggle in it. You don't get the impression that she's drowning. You get the impression that she's moving forward, that she's swimming, she's navigating, but everything is still out of alignment. There's a disconnect or a discomfort in that. Something is out of place. And for me, when I look at that picture in such a simple and beautiful way, I feel that in my nature. I feel that in my life. I feel that in my day-to-day experience. I feel this oddity, for me, dressing in this body, wearing this mind and trying to navigate through this world, trying to decide, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? Who am I? What does all of this mean? It's that struggle, pushing forward, swimming through it. You just have to get going where you're going, wherever that might be, but you're just out of your element. And you can sense that, you can feel that in life, that we are not what we seem, that this world is not what it seems. But what we do, we just get up every morning. I had this beautiful experience in New York City quite a few years ago now, where I was sitting in Central Park. It was a Saturday, and the friend that I had gone up there, the devotee from the DC Center that had gone up there with me, he was taking a nap on the grass next to me, and I was sitting on this little hill, and I was just looking at the crowd in the park. There was a group playing croquet and their laughter and goofing around with each other. There was a woman singing to a violin player. Beautiful music. There was someone dancing. There was an old man sitting with his head leaning on his cane, listening to that music. There were people walking. There were people at the popcorn stand. There was just all these things. And I had this, I don't know, for me, it was a spiritual experience, because I felt like for a moment I could see inside everybody. And I could see just this beautiful manifestation, because looking at them, none of us knows anything about this world that we live in. We have no idea what this is. We have no idea what its definition is. We don't know the whys, the whats, and the hows. And in this absolute unknowing, which we normally block out of our mind, we normally forget. And I always tell people, you can become aware of this not knowing by talking to a toddler. By the third time the toddler says why, you don't know. You can't answer anymore. You get to about that third level. And I sat there, and for a moment, I remember I began crying in a beautiful way that day, looking at this scene in Central Park, because I thought how beautiful this is, that we are born into this world knowing nothing, and yet we create dreams, we create ideals, and we build a life. We make it happen, despite all of the odds, despite all of the things that we're not in control of, despite all of the frightening things that can happen in a day. Despite all of the tragedy and conflict and strife around us, here we are, we can walk in a park and enjoy life, enjoy the unknowing, enjoy the comfort of friends, the play of games, and we can create something beautiful in the midst of what could be a terrifying reality if we were to face it, you know, with the potential of that spookiness, the fear of the unknown. And so I think in this picture of this woman swimming, pushing forward, completely out of context, out of place, and yet moving, yet breathing, yet surviving. And I thought, what a beautiful metaphor that is for living this life. We just get up in the morning and we gather our courage for the day, and we make our dream unfold. We make our vision happen, you know. And that to me is the divine, you know, that ability to have that kind of optimism in the face of knowing nothing, to be able to build nothing out of nothing and yet find it meaningful and finding it beautiful. That is God. That to me is the power of being human, you know, which I would say is another way of saying being divine.
Swami, I really second. I love that painting, that the one before that you had, the woman. Um, I think the only thing I would say is that that it really, to me, it against all odds, like you're saying, with the light and the darkness that happens in our life, there is certain buoyancy in her step, and a certain freedom and a certain fortitude, which the woman is portraying, which is how I would want to live my life, you know, with that erectness and that, you know, that for lack of word, of fortune, you know, with that fierceness, and yet the delicate, you know, thing in her step where she's just dancing along in this life. It's just absolutely beautiful. I think she really portrays me. I find myself, you know,
yeah, now that you say it, you're absolutely right. Even if you remove the idea of water, the poise in her presentation, there is a sophistication and a beauty to it. She's not fighting. You know,
no,
she's not afraid.
no.
She has a confidence. You're right.
Yes.
I didn't really notice that. Yeah. And there is a dance to her movement. You know, she, even in her hands, the way they're held, and her arms at her side.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah,
You're right. Very good. That's beautiful. Wonderful.
Love it. And the red.
Yes, the red.
And she feels safe and secure and strong in the water.
Yes.
Yeah,
you know, that's my
right.
hit, because a lot of people are not confident in water, and she is there and she's present. And yes, it's a very empowering picture.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, you're right. It really is exactly that. Exactly that. All of that, and yet you know that she's out of her element. You know, you know that she's swimming in a cocktail dress, and yet that's not the point, right?
Right.
And I think that's beautiful. What a deepening of that idea of our life clothed in this body in a world we're out of our element. We're spirit. We're not material.
Right.
And having to move through this very clumsy environment that doesn't feel like is native to us. To have that inner poise, to have that inner relaxation, that inner sophistication, that inner confidence, very important, very possible. All right. This picture I really enjoyed. This picture actually, when it's presented, this one and the burning house and the cows, they're not paintings. They were actually slide projections you walked into a dimly lit room, and these three pictures were projected on the wall simultaneously next to each other, which gave them even more of a ghostly presence, an unreal presence, you know, an image as opposed to a real thing. So she says, the work clearly evidences destruction and loss. There are glimmers of hope or optimism embedded within this and each surrounding piece. Kang achieves this balance by incorporating elements of water, livestock that symbolize life, fertility, and hope. and I began looking at this picture. What are some of the things you notice in this very odd picture of a home, of a house?
It's balanced on a cliff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
balanced on a cliff, but there's water and hope
Right.
around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's also the smoke up above, if that's what it is. I'm not sure if it's coming from the house or not.
It's coming from a
Or-
chimney, actually.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah,
So I saw
very
that. There's a lot of isolation there.
Yes.
You know,
yes,
there's
yes.
a lot of isolation. There's also this, I mean, it's a very odd place for a house, for a
Right.
home, and yet it's occupied. It is somebody's home. There's a fire in the fireplace going,
Mhm.
you know. So there were a lot of elements to that I liked. One is it also is a a testament of our insistence, you know, that home is anywhere. We can make it any place you can make a home, you know,
Mhm.
and it is in the middle of an isolation. It becomes your place, your refuge, you know. And I would say that that's what Brother Saint John is talking about when he talks about that inner shrine that we have. That we are isolated, we are seemingly alone, we are seemingly on our own, and yet within we can create this livable space, this space of our hope, the space of our healing, the space of our life, the space of our growth, the space of our comfort, our bliss, you know. The water all around is just the unknowing. It's the foreign element again for a person. And the rock to me is that unchanging space, that unchanging identity. That's where we build, you know, within. We don't put a raft out on the water and suffer the waves. We find the rock within, that unchanging Satchit Ananda, that helps us then to discern the world properly, to understand the nature of what's around us. I liked that feeling in here, and it's got a fairy book feel to it too, you know,
Mhm.
kind of a fairy tale sensation going on with it.
The water is so still.
Yes, you're right.
Yes, yes, it is.
You can
Especially
see,
for being such a big body of water. Yeah.
yeah, it's still in the reflection on it. Uh, the contradiction of there's wind, but there's no movement in the water.
Mm, mm. That's right. That's very good. No waves in the mind. Perfect. Oh, look.
Beach bone.
Beach bones. That's not the title of it, but it was a word that Jose used when he was describing the driftwood pieces, and I couldn't not mention that in a prominent way. I thought it was such a beautiful metaphor, beach bones. So this work here this is a very large piece of work. It's actually 7 feet by 4 feet or something like that wide. It's steel background with a piece of driftwood in the front. And the name of it is Maya. Now, a lot of this information is coming from Jose himself. So it's odd to be quoting Jose, who's listening to me quote Jose. But this piece of work, it's the way it struck me when I saw it, when I saw the Maya on the right, and that does refer to the Vedantic idea of Maya, to this um, Maya is it's not unreal. What's unreal about Maya is what we think it is, but not what it is. So Sri Ramakrishna says that there is something that we're looking at, like very much like the movie screen. The movie screen is what's real, and the light bouncing off the movie screen is what's real. Our watching the movie and projecting a story and feeling a story, that is the unreal. And so in Maya, that's what that story is. So you've got this uh, you know, this beach bone here laying there. You've got the past, which is represented by the patinaed darker piece. You know, darker colors like that in Vedanta are considered to be tamasic or inertia. And the past is pure Thomas in a way. It can't be changed. It's absolute inertia. It's just what it is. And that's where the majority of that driftwood comes from. It's most of its story is in the past because it's a bone, now it's a piece of driftwood. It's not living anymore. The story's over for it in that sense. So it's rooted in this past and even goes extending even beyond that past, even beyond the boundary of the past. And this line of separation between the two, that's the moment. That's our present. That in the ways Jose talked about it, that's that pristine moment that he found this piece of driftwood and saw the art and beauty of it and got the inspiration for what it became. So it's that moment, that slice between the past and the future in which the art was conceived, where it happened. And then this red, red is activity, red is rajasic, and the future is created by rajas. The future is created by our need to fix the present, our perceived lack or perceived imperfection in the moment. And so that red is covering the majority of that space in front. And yet this piece of driftwood is grounded in all three. Its past, its present, and its projected future are all presented to us. And it's all open to a context. One of the things that Jose said to me, he said, it's so amazing the kind of, and he didn't have the word for driftwood, but I put it in there, the kind of driftwood you find on the shore. It has always been a marvel to me. You can't compete with that perfection. There is a matter of time flowing in some of the pieces. To think about the moment of finding something, finding an object and pulling it out of its context and then reintroducing it in a different context as art. But it is the exact moment of finding the piece and knowing it. It seems like an accident, but the whole experience always brings you back to that precise moment of finding it. I thought, what a beautiful description in the process of what gave birth to this piece of art. And that as an artist, when he looks at it, it's very different from what you and I see when we look at it. I find it incredibly beautiful. But to know that when he looks at it, it takes him back to the moment he picked that piece of wood up on the beach. He says, the whole environment plays you, it defines you, but it is not true, and it is not false. Which is the dilemma of the Vedantist. that all of this, we allow it to define us, and it builds our life, it builds our comfort, it gives us our tools of creation, but it isn't true, and it's not false. There is something real going on, but we don't know what it is. We don't know what to do with it. And so we're taken out of our context and truly placed in a work of art, which is life, which is what we are. Our life is our story of love. It's our story of what divine love is. And I say that because it's that love, that divine love, is the only motivating force in the universe, according to Swamiji. So everything we do is born of a love for something. We love our house, so we go to work to pay for it. We love that tablecloth, so now it's on the dining table. We love our families, we love our cars, we love our vacations, we love all of these different things that have created this moment that's in front of us right now. That is your work of art. That is this painting, taking things that could have any context in the world and creating our own for it.
Yeah, I love it. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, very striking.
Very, very striking.
Now this one here, this one's called Nothing.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
2 pieces of beach bone on the left. Again, that division. And then this far right panel with nothing in it and nothing hyphenated. So it's no thing. So again, that,
Oh, it's no thing. Okay.
yeah, this kind of reference to definition, non-definition. Again, you broke into the panel. I'm going to project and say into the same segments, your past, your present, your future, the real being this kind of broken connection between the two. But there's not really anything there. And yet the past carries the relics, the samskaras, that suggest something happened, that suggest there was a past, that suggest there is something in front of us. But in fact, the only thing real is the bar of the present there in the middle, the isness in there.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of the personal and the impersonal, that it's in this sea of the impersonal that forms take place to not, to dissolve in it and not be seen at all. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice.
Very nice, Bindu. Yeah.
Yeah. But actually, that's where it's leading us. If we read life from left to right, it leads us to not nothing, but it leads us to no thing, which is very different. Yeah. All right. This one is one of his also. This one's called Neti Neti.
Neti.
And he said the things he said about it, the basic negation of what you are seeing, the neti neti, it's not this, not this. And he said on the day that he found this particular beach bone, this particular piece of driftwood, the sky was this perfect color of blue.
Wow.
And so he put it in that context, but he said, the neti neti part of it is that the sky's not blue. Ramakrishna draws that illusion too. He says, space is black. That this blue of the sky is an illusion. You can't see it, and if you were to draw nearer and nearer to it, it would disappear. It wouldn't be there. And so he framed it as this neti neti, and he illumines that idea of the emptiness, the nothing, in the framing of the piece of wood, where the sky is cut out, the lie, what he calls the beautiful lie, which I fell in love with that statement also, that this space of emptiness is the negation of the beautiful lie of the sky, of the blue of the sky. And that he again draws this allusion to the reflection and the reality. It's like, which side is reflecting which side, and is there a reflection there? Is it actually a reflection? He said in the shape of the wood, that's what he saw. He saw it's a mirror image, but one side is up and one side is down. And yet you can see a mirror image in it. And so he was, again, drawn to this idea that, our projection of ourself, the two halves of the picture, that we create a beautiful lie, which is life. But the reality of the self within, the creator of this projection, which isn't really a projection and isn't actually being projected, is that emptiness of the Buddhists, or that fullness of the Vedanta, that space of repose, as it is for this piece of beach bone sitting there in the middle of it. He said this piece is all about negation. Seeing the beautiful lie, but understanding it's a beautiful lie. And again, that line of division, which doesn't really divide anything, that there are not two, and there's not really one in there.
Nice.
Yeah. These three are prints. Usually you paint on a piece of acrylic or a piece of linoleum or something, and then you press the image onto using a print press. This first one is called Dos Líneas, or two lines, and it's about chance, actually. Because those two white lines that are in that print are actually two wires that he laid on to the piece of acrylic before he pressed the image onto the print paper. And he said that he wanted to bring an element of chance into the piece of art that he was not in control of. And so he laid these two wires on there, and when you press those two wires together, you can't control how they move or the shape that they actually end up in. It's part of the process. And so he liked that idea of having something that couldn't be controlled, and yet was a piece of yet part of a piece of art that he created. And that being another metaphor for really what life is. We kind of just sort of manage chance, right? How much of the day do we actually control? How many of the things that happen to us in an hour are we actually in charge of? And so we depend on this sort of controlled chance, which in order for things to turn out to be the way they are, but that there is by necessity a piece of surrender in the world to dealing with the world. Ultimately you just have to accept what comes because you can't control every aspect of it. Swami Prabhupada, he had this belief that there is an element of chance that's built into the creation. So he says, learn everything you want to learn. You still will never be able to predict absolutely what's going to happen next, because there is this element of chance that is the seed of the universe that will prevent you from ever being able to game reality, to control it. And I like to think about that, with these days of everybody collecting all this data about us. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much of fear and the sense of power that they're actually gaining by knowing all of these micro habits and having such a large pool of information. But I take comfort in this exact thing, that learn as much as you want, gather as much as you want. Mother has created this world on chance. She has put an element of the unknown into it that cannot be escaped. And so that we learn that lesson over and over and over again. This second one next to it is untitled, but he said that this is an exploration of the idea of not one, not two. That when we talk about God, we say that God is one without a second. Why don't we just say that God is one? Well, because if God is one, then two is implied. There's something is describing God as one. And so we don't say that. We say God is one without a second, or neti. God is not one and not two. And so in this art piece, he cut it in half and he says, does that make it two? Is it two halves, or is it two pieces of art being presented together? Or is it one piece of art? And so he's playing with that idea of not two, not one there. And the colors, he says, when you do a lino print like that, or not a lino print, when you do a mono print like that, the colors are always you can't predetermine them, because the pressing itself will mix them and change them. And so that element of acceptance is there also, and that chance is there also. So let's see, are there two, not one, not two, not three, a division, not a division? Sometimes it is the not knowing that is the most revealing. Which I like that statement. Sometimes it's the not knowing that is the most revealing. And so when he's creating this world, not knowing how it's going to turn out, then seeing how it's turning out, it's that not knowing and the process of it that's the most revealing, that tells the story. It's as close as you can get. You can only approximate. You can't control. He says in the end, when I do this kind of art, he says, I have to laugh, because in life it's that way. There's an element of chance, an element of unknowing. There's a void, and you have to go forward. And he says, if you don't develop the ability to laugh, that's when you're in danger. You have to be able to look at it and laugh. And this third one over here on the right, it's called Bits 1. And I was fascinated when I was looking at it. At first, I didn't really know what to make of it. But he talked about each one of those squares being a letter, like an alphabet. And he said, as you arrange them, they tell a different story and change meaning. And so he likes the idea of even things in this world are alphabets for learning, and things change depending on the order in which they're experienced or how they're experienced. And then he of course has that spiral, that infinite spiral of life at the bottom there. But I really liked that idea of a new alphabet, a new language, where a way of communicating. And what does it mean? You don't really know. You just kind of have to sit there and be with it and let it tell you, in a way, what it means, what its relationships are. Because in one sense, none of those pieces are related. And yet, because they're presented together, they are related. And so we draw that
Just
context.
beautiful.
All right.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to quickly go through this last piece. This was an installation piece that he did. He was asked to do it by his hometown. And each one of these chairs, they're stools that he made each one of them. There were 150 of them. And he would go out and just rearrange them regularly out on the beach. And each stool says, "You are here," or "Are you here?" So it says both of them simultaneously. And he's playing with the idea, that where are we? No, at no time can we know where we are in this universe. If we can say relatively where we are, like I'm in Colorado. But where is Colorado? I can say the United States, but in the solar system, where is the United States? And if I step outside the solar system to the galaxy, where is the United States? And if I step out even beyond that, where am I? My location is never known. I never know where I'm at, except relatively. I'm always in a place of not knowing. And so each stool that he made has a single point of contact between the "you are here" and the supports underneath it. And he set them out there in all these different arrangements. And his idea was he wanted people to take them, because that's the only way it could become true, is if the stool and the person were in the same place. And so he put them out there, and he said after the first one went, when there was no hoopla raised, he said quite quickly the rest of them slowly disappeared over the course of days. And everybody took each stool and made the stool true by being where it said they were. So quite a wonderful experiment, I thought.
Yeah, wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Love it. Love it.
All right.
Yeah, just love that. Love that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that is our art and spirit for this week.
Cool.
Absolutely wonderful.
Excellent.
Enjoyed. Yeah.
Very good. Well, we'll do it again, and I'll try. I'll have to keep it. I didn't realize I was 15 minutes over till I just stopped the full screen and saw. So, anyway.
Oh, it was excellent. Thank you, Swami.
Yeah. Thank you, Swami. Thank you, Jose,
And,
for being here, and love your pictures and your photos.
love it. And thank you, Jose. They're beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. All right. Well, we'll see everybody again.
Yes.
Jai Ma, be well.
Yeah, Jai Ma.
Take care.
Take care.